in this. I think most of you, well, all of you should see a prompt to proceed. We're going to record this to make sure it's a resource on our web page for the RFP. Again, appreciate everybody joining today. Really looking forward to some interest in this. What obviously is a really important project for the Lane County region of Oregon. And we think a really neat opportunity to build on some real success and momentum that this region has had. Well, I'll touch on at least briefly. My name is Jacob Collister. I am a planner with the Lane Council of Governments. So I'll introduce the Lane Council of Governments briefly as well. I am I play a lead role for some of the broadband and telecommunications functions that we serve for our region. And one of those is to facilitate this request for proposals process and to prepare for some future opportunities. So that's my role going forward. I'll be working in tandem with our director, our division director, who is going to essentially be the formal lead on the project. And so, Michael, do you want to introduce yourself really quickly as the lead?
Yeah, thanks, Jake. Michael Wist, Government Services Director for Lane Council of Governments. And yeah, working closely with Jake as the lead on this project moving forward. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Michael. We also have in the room with us Keith Testerman, who is a technician and significant support to the work that we do and will be very much involved in the process going forward. So what I want to do initially is just provide what I'm hoping to be a quick overview, and then we wanted to provide the opportunity, as we often do with proposals, to field questions that folks have. So we're recording this. We'll also be taking notes, and we'll provide answers to any specific questions in an addendum to the request for proposals, and post that to our website. So I'm going to someone could give me a thumbs up. David, can you give me a thumbs up on that? Are you seeing that? Thank you. Oh, well, the formal title for this is Regional Broadband Strategy and Funding Response. And so we'll describe why the sort of distinction in something as important as the title. Hopefully that emerges clearly. If you've read through it, perhaps you've already got a handle on that, but it is an important point. So the Lane Council of Governments is a fairly common form of government throughout the United States. Regional government. So we have member agencies, members who are government entities who have elected leadership. At the Lane Council of Governments, we have 35 member organizations, and you can see there it's park districts, it's fire districts, it's utilities, it's a transit district, ambulance district, the cities, the county itself, and I've surely missed some in there. But essentially, we connect with a wide range of entities and often assume a facilitative role and trying to sort of fill gaps. And broadband has become a key service that we have provided in that respect. Our mission is to coordinate and provide high quality public services to Lane County. Lane Council of Governments is dedicated to serving should have this memorized, right, Michael? Serving the public's interest and enhancing quality of life for citizens of Lane County. So the fact that you're on this call means that you understand how broadband and quality of life are related. And so it's a responsibility that we have gladly taken up and are trying to pursue. Lane County itself, for those who aren't as familiar, folks don't see that. Do they see that? Make sure they don't.
They don't. You need to admit Chris, though, is waiting.
So if you're not familiar, Lane County is it's the fourth most populous county in Oregon, even though it is largely a forested county. If you drive through Lane County, chances are you're driving through a forested area or farmland. But we do have some urban centers. So Eugene Springfield is the largest urban center within Lane County. It also happens to be the third largest metropolitan area within the state of Oregon. Lane County is a large western county, 4,722 square miles. So a lot of geography to cover, a lot of space between the communities within the county. We're one of the few counties that spans from the Pacific Ocean to the top of the Cascade Mountains. So consuming the southern end of the Willamette Valley. And another key defining element of Lane County is it's the home of the University of Oregon, which is a major employer and in a lot of respects sets a certain tone for the community. Broadband coordination within Lane County includes some formal coordination that's occurred over the years. We have what's called a public agency network, which is agencies within the Eugene Springfield area who coordinate on the sharing of public assets and coordinate on a bit of strategic planning. The Regional Fiber Consortium is a group that has a common interest in dark fiber. It extends slightly beyond Lane County, but is really centered in Lane County. We have a regional managers group who tracks, these are city managers in the area who track closely broadband. We have radio and emergency communications group that tracks on radio communications and communication really focused on emergency response. They've had a busy couple of years out here. There's a group that I facilitate. There's several that we facilitate, but a broadband planning and doing group. And that was really the group that brought this RFP to the fore and has been working on some of these details. And so it's a group of operational and some leadership folks who have seen opportunities on the horizon and are trying to respond. We also have received US Ignite grants. Those are National Science Foundation funds, and there's a group that convenes around that, mostly around smart city issues. The players that I just described, we're talking about utilities, we're talking about cities, we're talking about the county itself, we're talking about school and education service districts. The university is very involved and other forms of higher ed. We also have a transit district that is a key player. I was thinking about whether I missed someone, and there's enough of them that I might have, but I think I covered the bases. We have a fairly diverse group of public entities that participate. We also have, well, I'll talk about the private side here in a second. Several years ago, essentially representatives of the groups that I just noted there got together and had just before the pandemic actually, a scoping session to come together and try to map out some needs. And it ultimately was the genesis of the scope that you've seen. We had to imagine certain details, but frankly, a lot of the long-term needs we have are exactly the same. We've added some immediacy to some of what we have in that scope to be responsive to the very unique funding landscape that we find ourselves in. But at the core, things like what are our vision? Well, we want access. We want ubiquitous access. We want open access. We want lower cost, affordability. What do we need to do that? Well, we need, we actually coordinate pretty well, but at that level, we have to sort of up our game, frankly, to figure out how we establish governance and coordination at an even higher level to just really step into kind of next level opportunity seeking and efficiency obtaining to make sure that we do a good job with our public responsibility, that we take advantage of some awesome private partners that are around. And obviously it's awesome once in a generation opportunities for funding. So to what end, why? This is sort of unique in that we have this, even amongst the public sector, there is this element of economic development, right? So bringing vitality to these communities, jobs, and making sure that we're creating communities that can sustain into the future and be future-proofed. And then there's also that element of, well, we also have operations, we have concerns about security, we have concerns about making sure that we are as resilient as we possibly can be. So a range of things there. We took a little bit of a re-swing through this and came up with this planning and doing group, which is a subset of some of the folks that I outlined there. Vision really is to maximize outside funding. This is kind of our near-term vision. Okay, how do we take that longer term? How do we frame it into something for elements of this RFP to maximize outside funding secured for the county, its agencies and partners to address unmet local needs for affordable, resilient, high-speed internet connectivity across our county. I imagine those are terms that you've all encountered. It's where we're at. That's the important component to our region. The goals really summarized are that broadband needs to be available and affordable. It needs to be reliable, it needs to be resilient, and it needs to be fast. And then a sentence that I didn't finish here, which was delving into the tactics. The tactics are spelled out in the RFP under the section that describes, the scope of work initially within the body of the RFP. So we wanted to give folks a little bit of an idea of how we thought we could do that, but we need help. We definitely need some help. Some of our key infrastructure is we have an interconnect. We have a carrier neutral facility. That was a huge win for our community. We managed to secure that over the last decade so that we have a place where private and public entities can interconnect, and it's completely carrier neutral. It has facilitated lots of opportunities. It has really good momentum right now. We also have data centers and other connective facilities in the area that add to this fabric. We also have a new one that's being planned that has some of its, the majority of its funding in place, a facility in Springfield that would just, again, augment that. We also have a pretty healthy amount of publicly controlled fiber, and a lot of that is open access. Some of it is not quite as accessible, so there's some nuance, and part of the kind of need to organize is to make sense of how we make the most of some of that, but also really identify where our gaps exist and how we can do a better job. We secured, we wholesale, or rather buy and sell at wholesale, some connectivity transport. So we have our own middle mile that we established a while back, which was a big step forward for certain parts of the community, and really just whet the appetite for the rest of the community. And so we're hearing very clearly, what about us and how do we take those next steps? So there's a lot of momentum that we're trying to build on, I guess, is part of the picture I want to paint here. So jumping into the RFP itself, two components. Those who have seen this might have been a little confused about how these components were set up. I hope that as you reflected on it a little bit, it might make a little bit more objective sense. We have this long-term need that we've had for years that we've talked about, and it's the law, the governance, the documentation, the communications plans, the kind of big supporting structures that we've been trying to tackle and made some progress on. And then there's this once in a generation opportunity for funding that has very fixed timeframes. And we know we have dots to connect there. And we also know that if we wait, and if we try to take this the way you might map it out in a perfect world, say, well, really shouldn't component 2 be first? We would agree with that. What we're proposing is some creativity from proposers to help us figure out how we can take the elements of component 1 and component 2 and be as efficient as possible to be number one, responsive to the funding that we will see in early 2023. The state of, we don't have perfect information on this, but the message we've gotten is that the state of Oregon has applied for their B funding, and that from every indication we've had in early 2023, those funds will become available for application in Oregon. And so there's digital equity as well. There's quite a number of funds. We're working on a sort of parallel idea with the middle mile dollars, the $1 billion, but there's no way we're going to make that time frame. And so that's why component 1 and component 2 might feel a little bit flip-flop. The truth is we have a hard deadline for component 1, and we want to start to get some momentum. We also realize that there would be real benefit in having some continuity between those two. And someone could argue that those could be separated. We saw real value in having them combined, looking for multidisciplinary teams who can put together something that really is responsive to both of those in a creative way. So key dates, July 15th is the deadline that we landed on. All of this was a wrestle on the timeframes. We have no idea who we will work with at this point. We, might have extended that time frame a little bit more under typical conditions, but we knew that we needed to get into the fall with the contractor in order to make some progress on the time pressing components. We'll be evaluating those in the later part of July. We may or may not decide to conduct interviews, just depending on how our initial scoring goes, but that would happen, we would assume, in the last week of July. We would have a notice of intent to award at the very beginning of August. We hope to have a contract signed the first half of August. We've done enough contracting to know that there's some boldness there, but that is our aim. And component 1, we're looking for a completion date by the end of this year, and component 2 by fall of 2023. So that is my quick overview. Hopefully that didn't take too long. I do think there's a few kind of nuggets in there that weren't included in the RFP. And what we'll do is try to answer your questions here. And if we're unable to, we'll certainly be making note of those questions, establishing answers, and then sharing those as an addendum. So would anybody like to field a question? Rather ask a question. I'll be fielding the question.
Also, if anyone hasn't had a chance to put their name, email, and the organization that you're representing today in the chat, could you please do that, just so we can have a good list of anyone that filtered in after the beginning.
Let's see, I'm really bad at tracking chat, but will there be a formal QA period? There you go. Will there be a formal, Dylan, are you asking a question right now about whether this is formal or not, or? I guess I would call this as formal a question and answer period as we're going to have right now, so.
Sorry, my phone was muted. So there will not be a separate formal QA period?
Oh, here, I'm sorry. So you can submit questions to Michael, and we haven't thought through sort of the time periods of how we would cap those, but any question that you submit to us is a question that we will probably not respond to immediately or post on the website, but probably on a weekly basis, I would guess, something like that. We'll just provide answers to questions that come in that we can answer that aren't in the RFP. So I would watch the website on a, let's say, every Tuesday basis, probably is how we do that. Okay, so for subtask 1-2 on page 11, what is the expected method to collect information to be documented? All right. Just gonna bring this up so what was the section again? 1.22. Sure. Page 11.
Exhibit A.
Or the component is.
Subtask 1.2, sorry. Okay, documentation of current broadband speeds offered, current availability of subscribership, digital equity metrics, barriers to subscribership. I think what we'd be looking for is how, particularly in this first section, right? So 1.2 is the expedited component. You'll see some things that sound similar to this in component 2, because we had a sense that there might be a kind of expedited version and maybe a slightly more complete version that could be conducted to follow up on in the 2023 period of time that we have to go to September. We don't have a sort of prescribed sense for how you might provide that. I think one of the things that we will definitely, in working with the entity that pursues the work, would be to direct the contractor to some Oregon resources. I mean, most of you are familiar with many states pursuing, let's say, counter perspectives to the FCC's mapping. If you look at Lane County right now, for example, which some of you have probably done and maybe have it up now, you'll see that the and underserved dynamic isn't immediately attractive as far as the FCC map is concerned. But like many communities, we're quite skeptical, and well, skeptical isn't the right word. We know that that's not accurate, and there are some efforts underway to provide some more local insight. So some of that would be weaving that in as opposed to independently conducting that effort. Although if any contractor has a methodology that is seems to provide a good answer, or they've seen something in other communities, would certainly entertain that. So I think the question was, what format would these come in? I guess a report, a memo that would provide a summary of that information. Again, I think in component 1, it's really about providing a responsive, successful application. And so we would be looking to the consultant to help us pursue research that really always has that end in mind for component 1. So I hope that's helpful.
A lot of the notices for funding have a component that requires us to prove that we have eligibility for those projects. So, think of that component as a specific requirement that we're going to need for applying for these grants. So in whatever format really is requested by the notice of funding is probably the way that that's going to play out and that would be most useful.
Excellent question. As Lane is a rather large county, what is the amount of coverage or access expected? So one canned answer, based on what Keith just said, was that we certainly want to pose coverage that meets the responsiveness to federal grants. We have talked about, as the planning and doing group, that 100 megabytes is really like the bare minimum that we want to see. And so that's in alignment with quite a few of the federal guidelines. We have communities that are unserved, we have communities that are underserved, but the symmetrical 100 is, we think of as the minimum. Obviously, we'd love to see something in excess of that, but there are communities who are receiving currently far less than that. And yes, it's a large area with a lot of rural connectivity challenges. So Dylan asks, can the 2.3 qualification be satisfied using subcontractor experience? I'm sorry, I don't have these memorized for you. 2.3. Potential current and future configuration coverage based on the assessment of assets. Did I get that right? 2, 3?
Yeah.
Or is it the 2, 3? It's probably the earlier 2, 3. So I didn't see it make sense. Probably not sub task 2, 3, but the question related to, okay, yeah. Sorry, everybody, too many identical numbers there.
Do you want to clarify if you're talking about minimum qualifications or 2.3 in the component section?
Yeah, that would be the minimum qualification section.
Okay, so with that said, let me look at this again. Subcontractor experience. I mean, what we understand is that we put together an RFP and components that require a team. So we encourage teams, and so I think team implies inherently that there'll be some entities under subcontracting. So I would say the answer is yes. If you have a subcontractor who's clearly identified in the proposal as such, then yeah, we would include that in the overall experience. No, not one individual. Team proposal. We get it. We get that what we've heard and frankly what we've thought was there's these two components kind of lend themselves to two different kinds of firms. The continuity is important enough to us that we really think, and having some experience in the field, that there's a team that could be assembled that could provide enough, at least prime continuity to help us realize efficiencies through the two steps. So that's where we landed on that. Make sure I don't skip questions. I think we might have had someone sneak in a little bit late. I just want to make sure that the point that was brought up about this is not your only crack at questions. You're more than welcome to direct questions to Michael, who's noted on the RFP as the point of contact. Those are questions that we'll probably issue answers to weekly. Maybe as we get closer, we'll do that on a slightly more frequent rotation to ensure that folks have time to get answers that are critical. We just while people are thinking about questions, just want to make sure folks realize we really look forward to having some help. What we have in the region is a lot of passionate people who are very interested, very committed. We have a group that's been meeting for quite a few for years, and most recently for about the last 5 or 6 months trying to establish some continuity. That's not always easy to do with that sort of consensus. And the thing that we know we're missing is number one, some real immediate help. And number two, certain things that we just think are really better addressed by an external party, a neutral party, to help us think through some solutions longer term. So I think it's a really good opportunity to take some good momentum that's happening and direct it towards some really positive aims. I haven't touched on all of the interesting things that we've done in Lane County. One thing you might find interest in is the Huge Net project, which is something that happened recently, which was a municipal broadband project that is related in that it was accomplished by some of the partners in this effort. It also leverages some of the real advantages that we have that are underutilized or unoptimized, let's say, assets that really can help our community. So that's what we're looking for help to accomplish. Yeah, Chris, one of the things you notice in this is that kind of being not quite there, but a little bit ahead, sometimes puts you in an interesting spot.
Right.
Where you the radar a little bit. We have great things to accomplish, and we still need some assistance. I wouldn't say, the majority of Lane County isn't bleeding out, but there are a lot of individuals who are seeing what's happening in this county and wondering when are we going to get our shot.
Right. I grew up in Grants Pass, so I always drive through Eugene, and I'm always there, and I've worked through Lane County for decades, I can say now. But you guys is Sub Utilities, are they part of the organization? Oh, good. Okay,
Yeah,
so
very actively engaged.
excellent. Because I think the last project I was working with was with the city of Veneta, and we were doing that big cable section system going through to the Wicks, and I just wanted to make sure that, I remember working a lot when I worked at BPA with eWeb and Sub and everybody, making sure all of that stuff was going. So just wanted to make sure, is that the same kind of arrangement going forward, that everybody's really looking to leverage everybody's infrastructure, spreading from the center? Are we looking at like the Wicks out, right? The Wicks is going to be where you really want to orientate the centroid of this, or is other places wanting to be part of that too?
Yeah, it's a good, that is definitely the, let's call it the sort of default mentality. It's how we've operated at this point. I think we're always, when this amount of money shows up, everybody thinks, wow, wouldn't it be great to get like the dream resilient interconnect? How might that relate to our existing investments? That's part of what we'd like to think through long term, frankly.
Yeah.
Utilities, the utilities are just fantastic partners. They remain water and electric utilities, and they have a lot to bring to the table when it comes to broadband. But we're also hopeful that this higher level conversation can help them see some opportunities that they have
Sure.
in this problem. And but we're also, and I didn't actually mention this, but we have a lot of private partners, right? We have a lot of internet service providers, who co-locate in our facility, and we talk to them regularly. They get it. They get that what we're trying to do is create competition, that we're all about open access. And we found some real mutual benefit in how we've proceeded, and would like to continue to investigate those options, but reasonably agnostic about how, what kinds of answers provide the way forward, but certainly have some precedent for what seems to have been working for us historically. But we to get another lens on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know that in my prior lives, I had spent lots of time trying to work with some of those providers, getting them access to big long haul cables along I-5 and sections down to Medford and everything like that. So I completely understand, and I hope this is a great opportunity for a lot of those folks to get that access that I just frankly couldn't get them because of the geography.
Yeah, solutions are, we want to be responsive to funding opportunities. So we have sort of a wide enough sense for opportunities that we have that we feel really confident that we can put something positive together that has support, that synergy. We see urban areas being sort of key components of rural solutions. We do have these centers that enable that competitive component, these carrier neutral facilities. You know, if we can strengthen our middle mile elements, and we're in a much better place than we were. And I think that's what I was getting to before, where in some regards, you're trying to present a sort of dire situation, and our you know, we've done some good things and we're really proud of that, but it can be a liability to really paint the clear picture of where our gaps remain, and that they're there. We need some help getting that, telling that story. Could 2 RFP candidates be considered in some form of team collaboration? That's a good question. We've framed it as a preference for 1 team. I'm not sure if I don't believe the language in the RFP closes the door on that, but the idea that perhaps what we see emerging is an opportunity to sort of form a team ourselves. We haven't closed the door on that. So that's not our preference, but that is something that could emerge. You think that's fair?
Yeah, yes.
Let's see, the block of time that we established was an hour, so I don't ever want to rush if folks are kind of processing or trying to consider. There is a mechanism for posing other questions. They will be slightly more delayed than they're happening right now. They could also be slightly more thoughtful and detailed, but I think we've provided fairly confident answers up to this point. Maybe we'll give it a minute or so, and if we're not hearing questions, then we don't want anybody to be anxious about missing something, but listening to white noise either. So. Okay, well, if somebody pops something in while I'm wrapping up, we'll just jump into that question, but want to thank everybody for your time. And encourage you, we know that this is a busy time. We're not naive about the fact that there's a lot of need for help out there. So we're just really hoping that we can make a good fit, and really appreciate your effort and time and looking into it, and would love to answer questions you have that might put you on the fence one way or the other, and see if we can't figure out how to encourage you to be responsive. So, Michael, unless you have something else?
Just a reminder that anyone joined late, if you could please put your name, agency, and contact information in the chat before we leave, that'd be really helpful just for tracking attendance.
And we will put this, again, for those who were late or those who want to review some of the conversation or the presentation, we'll put the recording up on our RFP web page site for this project. So thank you, everyone. Appreciate the time, and enjoy the rest of your lovely June day, at least if it's anything like ours in Oregon here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How the cloud recording interfaces, you may have to download it.
Yes, I'll hit stop, and then it typically says
Trying to get them to retrieve that, so.